Hello, good afternoon. Welcome, everyone. I'm so happy to be here and so excited to be involved in this national webinar. This is an AMCD sponsored webinar called Courageous Conversations with Women of Color in Counselor Education, and that's women of all colors. Today, we are featuring the esteemed professionals and national leaders, counselor educators, professors, women on the move, Doctors Angela Coker and Rhonda Bryant. Hello, so welcome. So what we're going to do today is, first of all, students, teachers, professors, everyone is welcome. So I hope people keep on joining. Like Dr. Hipolito-Delgado said, just text your messages or comments or questions. I want to thank Dr. Carlos Hipolito-Delgado for his technological expertise in helping to launch this today in the series. Thank you so much. First, I would like to say that hour one, we're going to focus on some topics for Dr. Angela Coker, and all three of us are going to be in the conversation, and we're going to weave in your comments and questions as well to this courageous conversations with the hope to arrive at a courageous solution, because a courageous conversation is sometimes not enough. We have to take it to the next step, to the action phase. Hour two, we're going to focus on some of the research strategies for success as well with Dr. Rhonda Bryant, and that's the format for the day. Does anyone have any questions before I make introductions? No? Well, I also want to thank, I am here, there's no introduction for me, and it's because I'm just kind of low on the totem pole. I'm a professor. I'm an associate professor, program coordinator, director of clinical training at the Florida Agricultural and Mechanical University, hailing from Tallahassee, Florida. Very proud to be there at a wonderful school, and we're doing great things, have a great counselor education department. So I'm very happy that they support me and embrace and celebrate these efforts. So to begin, I'm going to introduce Dr. Angela Coker. She has many, many credentials, as does Dr. Rhonda Bryant, just like alphabet soup. PhD, licensed professional counselor, national certified counselor. She's an associate professor of counseling and family therapy at the University of Missouri, St. Louis. Dr. Angela Coker has many areas of expertise and scholarship, including women's issues, group work, and the internationalization of counseling. She is the author of numerous articles, book chapters, and co-editor of the book Experiential Activities for Teaching Multicultural Competence in Counseling. She is a 2011 Fulbright Hays Scholar who has examined cultural diversity in Brazil, and she does extensive work in Africa as well. Did I forget anything, Dr. Coker?
No, that's good for now. That's fine.
Okay. And our second esteemed and amazing women of color counselor educators, Dr. Rhonda M. Bryant. And the M is for magnificent, by the way. She's a counselor educator who's an associate professor of education, an associate vice president and dean of students at the University of the Pacific. She is a graduate of the University of Virginia, having earned a PhD in counselor education, a master's degree in counselor education, and a bachelor's degree in psychology. Dr. Bryant has held leadership positions in the state and national counseling organizations and has published several articles in peer-reviewed journals. She values being a professional counselor and is delighted to participate in this event today. Welcome, Dr. Bryant. Did I forget anything?
No.
Okay. And we have, and if the participants want to actually text, if you're a counselor educator or a student or whatever role, it doesn't matter. Everybody is welcome to this conversation. And what I would like to first say is that we've been working on this conversation for some time, and we had an overwhelming response at the National American Counseling Association Conference in 2015. It was standing room only. There were women, men, students, counselor educators, all over the room, sitting on the floor. It was supposed to go for 90 minutes, and we ended up being in the room for 3 to 4 hours, and there were lines to thank us for having the conversation, give us hugs, ask for mentoring. It was a great experience. Remember that?
Oh, it was
Our
wonderful.
room. The first room was too small, and they had to move us to the larger room. So it was a phenomenal experience.
Yes, I want to thank also the Florida Counseling Association and the American Counseling Association and ACES. At the last ACES conference, national conference, we had Dr. Terrell Portman, who slated this as a presidential session, and we had approximately 250 participants, and it was overwhelming. It put chills down my spine. And I wanted to just share with everyone that there are many, many comments and emails. All the professors have shared that it's been never ending since 2015, that the emails, the comments, the phone calls have not stopped from students and counselor educators being so thankful for this courageous conversation that we oftentimes have behind closed doors. We brought it to the stage and brought it out in the open to have courageous conversations to move forward. So with that said, I'm going to start with some questions. How does that sound?
Sounds good.
Okay, wonderful. So, Dr. Coker, could you please share with us why you became a counselor educator?
Well, you know, it's funny as I reflect back on sort of my childhood experience. You know, one of the things that I always loved when I was you know, a little kid, I would go to the library and I would always pick autobiographies to read. I mean, at that time, it was Maya Angelou. My favorite all-time autobiography is the autobiography of Malcolm X. And I was always drawn to people's stories. I always was drawn to people's journey from how they got to point A and point B. Little did I know that at that time, I was actually practicing to be a counselor.
Excellent.
You know, I've always been drawn to the human spirit and individuals' resiliency and perseverance. So it was probably in me all the time. I didn't know it. But more closely, I had a really positive experience in college. And I loved the college environment. So my entry into counselor education or counseling really began through student affairs. You know, I had again, wonderful undergraduate experience. I attended Brooklyn College in New York City. And I had really good mentors, people who helped me, and that had a huge positive impact on me. So when I think about counseling, I always thought, okay, well, how can counselors in higher ed in particular, you know, work to serve the needs of students? So I think that was always for me the draw, you know. For a brief stint, I was an elementary school teacher for a while. Yeah.
Really?
But I realized I loved helping, but I didn't like working with the little people.
That's okay.
I didn't like working with their parents.
Oh, yes. Parents can be a little challenging.
Yeah. But I mean, I always liked the helping profession. I wasn't sure, you know, how that was going to materialize. But, you know, having looked at counseling, I thought, this might be something I could do. And so went to graduate school and got my degrees and started the process.
What would you say is your favorite aspect of being a counselor educator?
Wow, that's a good one. A counselor educator. Well, we get to do a lot of different things. I mean, it's a cool gig, isn't it? I mean, we're going to talk about challenges, but the reality is it's a wonderful gig. And I feel so privileged to be able to train future counselors to go out into the field to serve others. So obviously the three areas in which we really do our work is service, teaching, and research. And I think I like helping others sort of realize their dreams. And most of our students, you know, come as a result of this is oftentimes their second career, or they hadn't really thought they'd be a counselor because obviously the first degree is the master's degree, so they've got an undergraduate degree in something else. So I do like helping students realize their career goals. So
Thank you. I can say that in the last, it's funny, we're all getting old. I remember going to the conferences back in 2002 and 2003, the first ACAs, and I do have to say that I remember, you and the Dr. Bryant being positive forces and just amazing women, and you can see that counselor education is your passion, and so you're meant, this is really the path that you're supposed to be on. I could tell that you love what you do, and I see your passion in each of you.
Yes, that is true. I do.
With that said, you touched on something, the teaching, research, and service. This might be an excellent segue to talk about research, because in counselor education, the way that we've been mentored and we mentor our students, it's very important to have a thematic research agenda or a thematic research trajectory. And I know some people even have models to articulate and help others that don't see it. Sometimes we have to break it down very simply to show them. It's almost like having a Miss America or that bottom line, what is your research? And sometimes we're interested in everything. Most doctoral students want to save the world. They'll say, Dr. Mitcham, here's my research idea. This is what I want to do for my dissertation. And they don't realize they have about 5 dissertation ideas in that one topic. So could you help us understand how you arrived at your thematic research agenda and tell us about your interest and just a little bit more about your research and what makes you you?
So primarily my work has been with women, research and service. Again, I go back to the childhood. I go back to my own personal history. I was raised by a single parent in New York City. I grew up in Section 8 housing in New York, and my mother had 8 sisters and 3 brothers. And so whenever my mother was working or she was, busy with other things, it would be my aunties who would come and assist my mom. So I was essentially raised by 8 non-strong Black women. And I've, all different sizes, thin women, big women with big arms and big hips, just the wide spectrum. And that had a huge impact on me. And so being a little kid, obviously, sometimes you're privy to what we'd say grown folks conversation is. And so, that sort of gave me a sense of, what might be some challenges that women face. But that being said, yes, I've always been drawn to working with women. I like working with women as a research population. And then most of my current work in counselor education has really looked at women's academic development, their career development, and their personal development. And more recently, I've done work in body image research with one of my colleagues here at the University of Missouri St. Louis, Dr. Kasherbeck West, looking at, with Black women, our issues of body image is not just weight, it's colorization, it's hair texture, it's facial features, and a lot of different factors that aren't typically addressed in the mainstream literature of body image.
Oh, excellent. It seems like, right, along with just women, sometimes in academia, just women, period, having that idea of being invisible. And we look at gender, we look at sexual orientation. So you've gone even beyond that to look at the physicality of it in the image.
Yes. And so currently, and of course, research should always be tied to service. One of the things that I've done here at the University of Missouri St. Louis is I've facilitated a support group for women of color here on campus, and it has been, for the last 5 years, we have done a weekly group, and the group is called Sister Scholars, and the whole purpose of the group is to help women with their academic and career goals. And I am so pleased to say that we have had tremendous positive responses. We've also had incredible institutional support. I've got a graduate assistant that's tied to that campus initiative. And for the last 5 years, we've been able to, every Thursday afternoon, provide lunch for our group participants. And it's an open group, so students are able to come and go as their schedules permit.
Wow.
Let me just say this, a key feature of Sister Scholars is not just about retention of students, it's really about helping women of color in particular, develop and enhance their intellectual identity as scholars in training. Because I think all too often as women, we're just so happy to be in a space, and particularly in school, we're just so happy to be there, right? And so we oftentimes don't necessarily take the time to develop that intellectual identity, because if we take a math class, we're happy to get that C just to get through. And we're always just spending a lot of energy sort of just getting through, as opposed to developing that scholarly identity, that letting education go through us. So that's a huge feature of the Sister Scholars Initiative, which is why we have a research component. We introduce sisters to the language of research. Typically, students who come through there, they know what an IRB is, they know what informed consent is, they have participated in research studies, and they're also a part of many research studies as well. So we've got undergraduate, master's, and doctoral students who participate. And we also have faculty who come as well.
Wow, that is excellent to have a program like that. That just warms my heart, because every school, every program needs that. You need a safe place to go to, because oftentimes as women and women of color, we might have some ideas for research that are not embraced and celebrated. And oftentimes, as you've heard in the past, and I don't know about, currently, sometimes, students have said their research was not embraced, so they were encouraged to go down another path. So that's wonderful that the students and the faculty have you leading this initiative. It's nice to be validated and know that your ideas are important and they matter and make a difference. So this is really groundbreaking. Thank you.
Yes, and part of that group, and group work is also one of my other specialties, but in terms of women of color getting together, the idea of self-validation, as Patricia Hill Collins talks about, is huge. That we don't have to wait to be validated by others. We can validate ourselves. And so the Sister Scholar Initiative is yet another tool or opportunity available to students to develop their intellectual identities.
Oh, excellent. I have a question for you about that. Is there anything that, in addition to the wonderful things you're doing with this group, Sister Scholars, is there anything that was an unexpected aspect or something that emerged as a result that was, is there any theme or something that really that came through and illuminated that you didn't expect?
Oh, that I didn't expect. I mean, we talk a lot about what propels us, what are the coping strategies that help sustain us. Well, I can't say what I didn't expect, but one of the issues that I have noticed that has not necessarily emerged in our discussion groups, because it's oftentimes we have some structure, but when women come in, we let them sort of have a free discussion about what's on the mind. We have had a few lesbian sisters, and also 1 or 2 transgendered women who have participated in the group. Yet that's been an issue that sort of has not been addressed and talked about. So one of the concerns I have is I wonder to what extent our group is really being inviting to our lesbian sisters in terms of them openly talking about their challenges.
That's an excellent point. I want to just share something from our national courageous conversations. We did have a question from the audience, but we just had such limited time, and I don't know who wrote it, but I want to just to piggyback on what you said. There was actually a student that raised this question for the Courageous Conversation series. She said, for LGBTQ women of color, I came to my doc program with a full of hope to race together with my colleagues, but faced rejection due to their personal beliefs. She wanted to know, how can we stay together in solidarity? Queer women of color are also invisible and feel that they don't matter sometimes. So that's an excellent point.
Yeah, I mean, it's something that I certainly, it's an issue I really care about, because we really want to be inclusive of all women. And so I think in terms of, again, bringing up issues or concerns openly, that that's important. I think that co-facilitators, because oftentimes I'll facilitate, but I do have a doctoral student who's a graduate assistant, and part of her responsibilities is to facilitate the groups. To potentially have a structured conversation about the issue and to address it up front.
Excellent. So we've heard a lot about your research, which is absolutely wonderful. Could I ask you, what is I know you've mentioned group. Do you have any other course that's your favorite course to teach?
Well, it's the intro to counseling class. It's sort of intro. So, I really like the first semester master's level students, because they come in, they're really wide-eyed, they're really excited about this new chapter in their lives. And so they're just so hungry to absorb all the knowledge. And so I really like teaching that class, because it's really the first time that they're developing, they have a class that's designated to helping them develop their professional identity as counselors. So I really like that class a lot.
Okay. Oh, excellent.
Yeah.
So what I would like to transition into now, you've mentioned a lot of wonderful, positive things, and we know that with opportunities, there are also challenges. So what I would like to talk about now is, could you address some of the challenges facing women in higher education? And I want to ask that everybody remember to mute their microphones. Thank you so much.
Yes. Well, I'm going to just backtrack slightly with the research piece, because it ties into some of my challenges, right? So the other piece to my work is that I'm also very passionate about doing work on an international level. And so, it just made sense that post-tenure, I would be looking at women's issues on a global scale. So most of the work I've been currently doing has been focused in Africa, and in South Africa in particular. That being said, one of the challenges that I've had is, as a Black woman, there aren't a whole lot of people who look like me who was doing that kind of work in terms of going out, looking at the internationalization of counseling. So financially, that's a huge endeavor. You don't get a whole lot of grants to say, hey, go abroad and study other people's culture and explore the ways in which it might inform our work as counselor educators here in the States, right? Mm-hmm. So typically, you do that kind of work and you make the personal economic sacrifice because you want the global experience. So one of the challenges I've had is looking for grant monies to go. So that's and then also, again, as a Black woman, very few women are doing this kind of work. Black women are doing this kind of work in counselor ed. Most of the people who have name recognition in that area typically tend to be individuals who are unlike me, who aren't parenting because I'm parenting, right? Mm-hmm. And then, or who, their kids are out of the house. So they typically tend to be older white men or women who don't have children.
Oh,
And
excellent.
so one of the challenges I've had is simply sort of managing those multiple responsibilities, which is one of the things on the list, managing multiple responsibilities. Um, I think that's a big challenge in terms of personal challenge, childcare, right? As counselor educators, most of our courses are in the evening.
Yes.
And childcare ends at 5 or 6 o'clock,
So,
right?
yes. So I have a question. Before we move on, I want to talk about that balance because oftentimes we learn in our doctoral programs, we think we have to, it feels like we're forgetting about our family, but we're trying to give school 100%, our families 100%. Some of us have been single mothers or taking care of an elderly parent. There are a lot of, life challenges.
Mhm.
And if you're trying to give 100% to all areas,
You can't.
it feels like you're standing under Niagara Falls trying to catch all of the water with a teacup, and it's overwhelming.
Yes, it is. It is very overwhelming. So we're learning how to manage those multiple responsibilities. Again, some of the challenges facing women in higher ed, it's not just Black women, but all women, pay equity. Still across the board, women are not paid as much as their white male counterparts. I mean, that's a huge issue on most college campuses, right? And I think
Absolutely.
for women of color in particular, we're oftentimes responsible, whether in kind or in commitment, to helping our other family members move forward, particularly first generation women of color. The expectation is, okay, so you got your degree, you got your PhD, you're going to help. You're going to help out with somebody else who may be in a struggle. So that financial piece really, that check doesn't just belong to you. It belongs to your kids, it belongs to extended family, those kinds of challenges. So there's a lot of intersection there. So, inequity in pay, managing multiple responsibilities. And then also, I think in terms of dealing with stereotypes, Melissa Harris Perry, she talks a lot about the crooked room in her book, in her 2011 book, Sister Citizen. She talks a lot about that how when you were in higher ed, oftentimes, and particularly at the master's and doctoral level, you're oftentimes the first woman of color that a lot of these students are interacting with. So it's a new space for them. And they're dealing with a whole lot of stereotypes or preconceived notions about competence, credibility.
Yes.
So sometimes it works in that way, that it's a negative sort of stereotype, and you got to deal with that. Or I'll take it to the other end of the spectrum, where what I call it sort of the Oprah effect. That, then you'll have all these students coming into your office crying on your shoulder, and you want to be a good mentor, you want to be a good advisor, but you don't have time to do that. And I know that I do attract a lot of students, white women in particular, who really are they want to have the new experience with a woman of color.
Yes.
Sometimes they're sick of having the experience with white men, and so they do want to have that. But sometimes it can be a positive thing in terms of, they think that you're very competent and you're a good listener and you're a good nurturer, but then that's also time you could be writing too. So you sort of have to manage that. I want to just quickly talk about how sometimes that presents an issue in supervision. Okay, so I've had a couple of white students tell me that, at the end of the semester, we have a doctoral program, we've got awesome students, but we talked about this multicultural impact of having a Black supervisor and having supervisees who are not Black. A white student said that, that she, in supervision, she would oftentimes feel intimidated by me because of her perceptions that Black women were they were super strong, they were super
Wow.
women. And so she felt that if she revealed her own vulnerability, I might have a negative perception on her. So that influenced some of the things that she would disclose in supervision about her own uncertainty about moving forward with a client. So I thought that was very interesting that here was this stereotype of me being a Black woman and being super strong and how it impacted the supervision dynamics between she and I.
So that's very interesting because, as you know, when we practice mindfulness and look at the multicultural competencies, we have to try to figure out all those intersectionalities that are happening and occurring and being open-minded. I remember one time teaching and years ago, and a group of students, was the first day of class. I had on my suit, had the PowerPoint up, I had the books laid out. I was ready to welcome the class, and a student walked in, and she went like this, and she looked around, and I was right in front of her, and she said, do you know where Dr. Mitcham is? And I said, actually, I'm Dr. Mitcham. Mm-hmm. And she said, oh, you're not what I expected. And I said, really? I said, what did you expect? I'm really interested in knowing what you expected. And she said, I don't know. And I said, well, I am so happy to have you here. Welcome to my class. We're going to have a great semester. And so I had to really, really, welcome her and go overboard. Yeah. And it ended up being a great semester. But I remember her, and I remember thinking maybe this was something new for her. So I didn't take it personally, right. But I had to reflect because we are reflective practitioners, we're reflective professors, counselor, educators, and it's important to understand what all those interactions mean.
Yes, absolutely, absolutely. And again, I think about the example I gave you of being a super, the stereotype of being a strong Black woman I had never really considered prior to my interactions with those students, that it could have a negative impact on the supervision session.
Interesting. That's interesting. So when you think about the classroom, supervision, interactions outside of those two spaces as well, because I noticed that sometimes students will be different if you happen to run into them at Starbucks.
Yes, that's true. That's very true.
And that space probably is not one where there's any evaluation component. And so it tends to be much lighter. Yes. So anyways, it's interesting. I would like to talk about, and this is a great conversation, by the way, can you talk about what else you've learned in your own journey as a counselor educator? Can you speak a little bit about that?
Mm-hmm. Yes. And obviously I'm still learning, it's still a process. So one of the things that I think that's really important for people to, one of the things I've learned is that it's so important that first of all, we work hard. There's no not working hard, and there's no shortage of work. So we always work hard. So that's not a question. But when you're asked to do a job, it's really important if you take on a responsibility that you do a really good job. Because if you don't do a good job, people will remember that. As opposed to, that you stepped up to the plate and you said, yes, I'll do it because you want to be a good team, a good member and citizen of your department. You want to be a good faculty person. You volunteer for these opportunities, but you've got to do a really good job. We just finished our K-CREP study, and, that certainly was hanging over my head. I was like, yes, if I take this on, I better do the right thing, Mm-hmm. The other thing too is when you're struggling, ask for help. That's such an important thing. Ask for help, and ask for help within your department. Sometimes if we're going through something, it's really important to have conversations with, let's say, your chair. Share what you are going through. Don't close up. Sometimes I think as Black women, we tend to close up and sort of keep to ourselves and isolate ourselves. But it's really important for, your colleagues to you don't have to go into detail, but have some sense of what you might be going through, because you don't want to leave them to their own imagination while if you're not feeling good or things are obviously are not right. The other piece too is take care of your deficiencies. We all have some areas that we could, increase. So if you don't know a whole lot about stats or quantitative research methods or, program evaluation, go take care of that. Take an extra class, do some extra readings. I mean, we all know ourselves and we know where the areas that we could sort of enhance our skill level. So that's an important thing, definitely take care of yourself and your deficiencies. The other thing that I've realized too is it's really important to be interdisciplinary. We are counselor educators, but I think by the nature of being Black women and having a sense of being an outsider within, can you see me?
Yes.
Oh, okay. Because something happened where I didn't. Yeah. Okay. Sometimes, as Patricia Hill Collins and Bell Hooks talks about this notion of being an outsider within, having an outside perspective, but also being a part of a group, but then separate. We tend to have an angle of vision and perspective that sometimes other people don't necessarily have. And rather than seeing that as a deficit, you see it as a strength. And that, I think, has allowed me to also be interdisciplinary in my own work. So I'm a faculty affiliate in gender studies. I'm also a fellow in the International Studies program. And so I'm able to cast my net wide where I'm working with and cultivating other relationships with other departments across campus. So I think that's really important, to be interdisciplinary as well.
Excuse me for 1 second. It sounds like, Dr. Coker, what you're also saying, which you haven't said, but obviously you're in a climate that is very supportive of that. Because at some schools, there seem to be more territorial, and there could be another department across the hall, but those departments really don't come together. Yes. So you're in an atmosphere that's conducive to sharing and being collaborative. That's what it clearly.
Yeah. I will say that the University of Missouri St. Louis has been really good to me. Mm-hmm. I will also say that my husband is also on faculty here, and they've been really good to us as an academic couple. So yes, we are. But mind you, I didn't start doing all this interdisciplinary stuff until I became tenured.
Wait, stop. Now this is the second time you've said that. For those that are in their first, second, or third year, we do have doctoral students, even though they may know, about what that is. There are clearly some implications for being pre and post tenure. Oh, yeah. So could you say a little bit about your trajectory and changes in some of your initiatives post tenure?
Yes. So, for example, those first 6 years, what you're doing is trying to, you have to prove and validate why the department hired you. That's really essentially it. This is why they hired you. And so you really have to have a very focused approach to your work. You can't be all over the place. You want to be able to make contributions in a very intentional way. And your time is limited, we all have full lives outside of academia. So you really have to be intentional about how you use your time. So for example, I didn't launch Sister Scholars again until I had tenure. I didn't start becoming an affiliate with gender studies until I had tenure. I didn't actually start doing my international work until I had tenure. I wanted to show that I was anchored as a counselor educator. I didn't want people to question whether my professional identity was someplace else. I wanted them to know it was squarely as a counselor educator, which it is. I mean, that's fundamentally where my professional identity is.
And also, I think what everyone understands, it takes time developmentally to start. Even when you get your PhD, you think, okay, wow, I've made it. I'm at the top with this degree. But really, you start at the bottom.
Yeah.
everyone starts at the bottom, assistant professor, then associate, then full professor. And it takes a while to really own and put on and feel comfortable in that new outfit. You know, when you put on that, you know, jacket of being a counselor educator, it takes time. So there's some professors I found that are doing a lot of other things, for example, and if they're too busy doing other things, it is hard to cultivate and nurture. When you say to cultivate that identity?
Yes, yes, yes. And, you know, here in our department, they try to really protect junior faculty and not give them too much service. But because we're also a doctoral program, you know, that's another whole piece that, you know, that really drains on your time and energy. I mean, not drains, let me not use that word, but it pulls on your time and energy. So that's another factor. So I think that, you know, when you're thinking about which programs to select to work in, you know that if you select one that has a doctoral program, that is incredibly a whole lot more involved in working with master's level students as well.
So when you're thinking about, you mentioned a lot about committees and service, and we know the part of the equation of research, teaching, and service.
Mm-hmm.
I know that some universities have an unwritten rule that junior faculty should only serve on 2 committees, maximum, maybe 1 for the department or 1 for the college, eventually 1 for the university. Do you recommend any equation or something, a recipe for success as far as committees? Because oftentimes women of color and women, period, will be called to be on a committee because they want a diverse committee. So you can be called on to be on 10, 15, 20 committees, and you have to clone yourself. How does your, you know, program protect junior faculty, perhaps, or what do you say about protecting yourself from being appointed to many different committees as the new person on the block?
Yeah, one of the things that you really need to do is have strong advocates in your department, good mentors who help guide you to and teach you how to say no. Now, Michelle, there's the formal committees and then there are the informal committees.
Yes, excellent point. Yes.
Informal committees that you're not really appointed, but people kind of expect you to be involved, you know, and so you really do have to create some of your own professional boundaries. You can't be everywhere. I mean, I think the most effective way is you get your tenure and then you're in a better position to be on those committees later. So, you know, pick 1 or 2 that you have a passion for, and then the others you say, you know, you have to just sort of put those on hold. But
so
again,
I have a question. I have a question for you. Sorry for interrupting.
Mm-hmm.
Say, for example, let's do what we like to do as counselors. We do role plays. So I want to do a role play with you, okay? I'm there. I'm the chair of some committee. So, Angie, Dr. Coker, you are such a great part of your department. You contribute so many things, and we just love your attitude, and you're a get-it-done person. We have this wonderful opportunity for you to be on this committee, and I know that you're overburdened, but we really don't think it would take much time. Please say yes. Would you be on this just 1 more committee?
Well, you know, I would really love to do that, and I know that the work of that committee is really important work, and I would really love to support their efforts. But right now, my focus is really being able to work on my research agenda, and that I'm going to have to decline at this time, but I certainly will consider it for a future date.
Oh, excellent. Bravo. That was smooth. That was excellent. That is wonderful. I'm glad that this is being recorded, because these are things to put in your toolbox, okay, for your strategies for being successful. That is absolutely wonderful. You get an Academy Award for that. Thank you.
All right.
So one of the things you mentioned is you mentioned it several times, the word mentoring.
Yes.
Let's talk a little bit and, focus our attention on the importance of mentoring. And maybe if you want to share a little bit of how you have been mentored over the years, if you want to share a little bit about that.
Oh, yes. You know, it's so important. I will tell you that mentoring, it comes in so many different forms. And I think I shared this at the conference back in October, but one of my my most strongest mentors was a custodian. His name was Brother Trotman at Brooklyn College. Now he didn't have a degree. I don't even think he had completed high school, but he was someone who he'd see me walking in the halls, going to and from class, and he was a custodian. But every day he would ask me, "How you doing? Doing well in school?" And so that really, I tell you, his interest in me really sustained me through some challenging days where I wasn't even sure if that school was where I wanted to be or even wanted to finish my degree. So mentors don't necessarily have to have the PhDs, but they are someone who show an interest in you and help motivate you towards meeting your goals. So I will say that, right? In counselor education, the people who have been really the biggest mentors to me, are Dr. Thelma Daly. She, first African American woman to be president of ACA back in 1976. 1975, first African American woman to be president of what we now know as ASCA. Cheryl Holcomb McCoy, now new appointed dean at the American University. Carla Bradley, who's at Western Michigan University. My sister here, Rhonda Bryant, yourself. Beverly O'Brien, also past president of ACA. Sarisi Olatunji West. I mean, these are some, when I go to ACA, I will be honest with you, I enjoy the sessions, but the thing that I come there for the most is to connect with other women. The visualization of seeing other African-American women in that space is sustaining and healing for me. That's where, for me, it's like I'm going to a revival. I'm doing a pilgrimage each year because that's where I'm getting my energy from other Black women. Also, here in my department, I have been really fortunate to have really good mentors here in my department. Our departmental chair, Dr. Mark Pope, has really taken me under his wing in terms of helping me with my research. Dr. Kashabak West, Susan Kashabak West, we've done work together, and Dr. Rocco Catoni, who is an ethicist. So they've really been people who have really mentored me. And then I've got folks across campus too. So again, you got to spread your wings wide.
Excellent. So the part of mentoring, because we've had many of the students and even professors that attended the presidential session for Courageous Conversations said we would like to have more mentors on our campus. Yes. And so I like the fact that you're saying it's not just on your campus, that it's across the campus of the universities, the American Counseling Association, and that's really a great time to nurture and cultivate some of those relationships and get involved.
Oh yes, and also I will do a shout out to our Latina sister, Patricia Arredondo, first Latina woman to be president of ACA. I mean, these are people who, again, because they are there, it gives me inspiration that I can be there too.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah, thank you for mentioning those just amazing women who you see show up all the time at the conferences. And it seems like their help is endless in taking on more mentees.
Yes, absolutely. Yes.
So at this time, what I would like, we got into the advice section, and we're at the almost near the end of the hour, but we have still a good amount of time for questions and comments. Is this a good time for everyone? We would like to open the webinar to questions and comments to you, Dr. Coker.
Okay.
So if anyone would like to, you can text your question, you can type your question in the chat box, or you can ask the question. Is there anyone that would like to ask a question?
And while you're thinking about your questions, let me just say this too, in terms of giving advice to other women in counselor education. You know, this is, you know, being in higher education, being a counselor educator is such a privileged, wonderful job to have. And we're so fortunate to be able to be employed in our field, right? But one of the things I want to stress is that it's so important for you not to seek your validation, all of your validation in this one space. You've got to have some other things going on in your life. And I know that, you know, making the journey from being a doctoral student to being an assistant professor is a very long, drawn out, often intellectually isolating experience, and it's so much of it comes down to evaluation, but you cannot only look to this one space to empower you or to validate you. Have, you know, time permitting, have other things going on in your life. You know, many of us have children, and trust me, having children is a very humbling experience. They keep it real. And so I just want to impress upon you that you got to get your validation someplace else, because if it doesn't go down right in that one space, then we don't want, you know, we want you to have some other things going on too. Also, again, find some support from others. So mentors don't have to be other Black women. They can be white men too. So identify those mentors as well.
So excellent. So in that time, I like what you're talking about, balance. Balance is something that is really hard to maintain. You know, how do you, so balancing, so having your self-care plan, we know, we talk a lot about having a self-care plan and wellness.
Yes.
Sorry about that. So we talk a lot about wellness and balance. What has been, did you always have your balance like this? I mean, was it always easy for you, or?
It's currently not easy. It's always a work in progress. And, you know, I tell doc students, first year doc students who, you know, they're really excited about this new chapter in their lives, but the reality is they're not going to be as emotionally or physically present for those others, for those significant others in their lives, because their time and energy is being taxed in another way. And so, yes, you can strive for balance, but you're not always going to achieve it all the time. Sometimes, you know, those few months are going to be topsy-turvy. You just got to be okay with it and realize, hey, you know, it's going to get better later. But this whole sort of mythical notion that balance is something that you're always going to have all the time. Sometimes we have a fair amount of disequilibrium that we just sort of have to kick into gear, those coping strategies to get us through, you know? Mm-hmm. So balance is, you know, it's always a work in progress.
Oh, excellent. So is there a schedule, this is from Keisha, is there a schedule that you keep that helps you to stay focused on your goals? What do you keep in mind to help you organize writing, research, and teaching responsibilities? That's an excellent question. Thank you.
Yes. So I typically I always have notepads with me. So if I have an idea, I'm always writing things down in terms of, oh, you know, I should, you know, write about this, or I get an idea about a manuscript. So yes, writing stuff down, so important, because I can't keep everything upstairs without writing it down, right? Typically Fridays are my days to write, but I'm always writing in my head every day. And you always got something going on upstairs. So yes, I do try to keep a schedule. I always write things down. I've got a great planner. And so that sort of helps me with my research. And you know, you want to spend time and you want to have good teaching evaluations. You do want to spend a fair amount of time teaching, But I would say if you had to prioritize, spend more time with your research and then your teaching, because I think research is the thing that I call research your way to pay yourself. So like if you are teaching, that yeah, you're going to get good teaching evaluations, but that's not something you could sort of, you can't take it with you. Research is something that's a portfolio that you can take with you. You paying yourself, whereas teaching, you're kind of paying the university in some ways. But I think they're all, research and teaching are all very, very important. And
I'm sorry, were you? Oh, that's a great question. I'm looking at you. I don't know if you can tell, but I'm looking at you. I have found that sometimes my schedule gets in the way because I'm so focused on my schedule that I can't be flexible. And so at different points in my life, my schedule might look one way. I'll talk about my relationship with Dr. Coker. There were many times I called Dr. Coker 10 o'clock at night, 11 o'clock at night, 12 o'clock at night, and we were both up doing what we do because our families were asleep. That may not be what we need to do now. So Dr. Coker gave you good advice, but what I would say to you also is be flexible, because there are times you will not have the mental energy to do the research, and that's when that partnership is so helpful, because you can say to your writing partner, you know what, I'm going to edit and I'm going to do the lit review. And it kind of balances itself out. So just know that in planning your schedule, there are going to be times where you have to throw the schedule out the window and take a nap or watch cartoons, and being flexible helps keep focused.
Yeah, such a good point. Such a good point, Dr. Bryan.
Excellent. Are there any other questions from any of our participants? If so, you can text it in the message box. Excellent. Thank you. Is there anything else, Dr. Coker, you're thinking about, the toolbox and what you need? What other tools you need in your toolbox for advice? Are there any other thoughts? And of course, we have another hour, and I understand a lot's going on, hour 2, but is there anything else that you would like to add?
Yeah, just the other piece, and which is a major piece of my own research, is the international piece. One of the things, one of the ways in which we become expanded scholars is to be, intellectually curious internationally and looking at global issues. I think that only enhances our profession in terms of counselor education and as an academician. I think that's really important. We talk a lot about that in our Sister Scholars group, the notion of expanding your understanding of multiple perspectives in terms of globalization.
Okay, thank you. So we have had a wonderful first hour listening to Dr. Angela Coker. Thank you so much for sharing your research, your spirit and all the positive experiences that you've had. And how many years now? You didn't share with us. How many years have you been a counselor educator?
Oh my gosh, since, technically 2001, but I would go back to 1996. I don't know what's the math on that. I've got over 15 years. Yeah, over 15.
Wow. So that says a lot. Thank you. And you're surviving and thriving. So thank you for sharing those tools for being successful. Thank you. So we're now going to transition to Dr. Rhonda Bryant. Welcome again, Dr. Bryant.
Thank you.
So we're going to start off, with the same questions. And I want to first ask you if you could share with the audience here, please tell us how and why did you become a counselor educator?
So I'll start with my master's degree in counseling. I am a first-generation college student, and I ended up majoring in psychology. And my best friend, whose name is Susan, decided that she was going to get a master's degree in counseling. So I figured that since I didn't have a job, and if I went home, all they were going to make me do was get a job, I decided I'd go to grad school. So I followed Susan to University of Virginia master's program in counselor education. I did not quite meet the admissions requirements, so there was a gentleman there named William Van Hoos, and you may not recognize his name, but he, Bob Pate, and a few other guys got together and decided to start an organization called KCRAP. So I went to Dr. Van Hoos as a first-generation college student from Washington, D.C., had no clue who he was, and said, you know, I don't think I meet the grade point to get in this program, but if you let me in, I really promise you, I'll do my best to represent you well. I'll get good grades. And we hear a lot about how not to beg for a place at the table. And I didn't feel like I was begging, but I felt like it was fair to ask. He gave me a full scholarship. So yeah, he did. So I took those 2 years, became a counselor, went back to DC, and I was a substance abuse counselor at the height of the crack and PCP epidemic in the 80s and 90s, which informed all my practice. Saw a lot of things working for U.S. Parole and Probation, and decided at that point that I wanted to go back and get my doctorate to train counselors on how to do it the ethical and appropriate way. So a little bit better motivation besides following my best friend to a master's program in counseling. So that's how I became a counselor educator.
Wow.
Interesting. Wow. So, and how long have you been a counselor educator?
2 years. Since 1999.
Okay. So it's been a long time.
Yeah, it has.
So are there any, what are your favorite courses to teach as a counselor educator? And what are the favorite aspects about being a professor and being an administrator that you like?
Okay, my favorite class to teach is assessment. I just wrangled statistics out of someone. So nobody ever fights for those classes. Like, nobody wants those. But I like teaching them. And you asked about what I like being about a counselor educator and an administrator?
Yes, because I know that you have on many hats.
Yeah.
I want to pause just a minute because Angie knows where I'm about to go, but I need to talk about this. And I need to share this for the women on the call. I left higher ed. My first professional experience in higher ed was not the best. So I said, you know what? I'm going to become a school counselor. Excuse me. And that's what I did. Dr. Coker walked me through that exit process. And I think maybe after a year or two, she called me back and she said, okay, it's time for you to come on back to higher ed. We need you, girl. And I said, I'm not coming back. She said, no, we need you. Come on back. So and she didn't say much more than that. So I knew that was really all I was going to get. So I decided to return to higher ed after what I thought was a very disillusioning experience. I had high hopes, and I didn't understand the politics of higher ed because I just didn't know. So I did return to higher ed at that point. Took on another tenure track position, actually had a better experience the second go around. But what I like about being a counselor educator is that we change people's lives just by preparing great counselors. That's what we do. So that's the best part about being a counselor. The best part about being an administrator, I'm thinking. The best part about being an administrator is the art of the deal. I had a conversation with my husband about this the other night, and I said, you know, I need to really learn how to make deals. And we look at that, I think, in our community as unethical or disingenuous, but it's not. We have to learn how to get things done with different kinds of people. So being an administrator requires me not only to use my counseling skills of listening and empathy and understanding, but learning how to find common ground where there are competing interests, and that's not always easy.
No, that's not easy. One of the things I've always thought is that counselor educators need a course on conflict resolution, because we don't have that. And so oftentimes counselors are afraid to have this courageous conversation because we're not trained in the art of interest-based negotiation. We know that in many spaces, people are very position-based and they're stuck in their position and positions of power. And sometimes we don't get the mentoring that we need to negotiate, and again, negotiate with the best interests in mind. So that's quite an education probably that you've had since you've been in leadership roles.
Yeah.
I can relate to that. So tell us a little bit, you mentioned that you love the research classes and assessment. Can you talk a little bit about, let's talk about research, teaching, and service in any order that you would like, if you could share your experiences.
I'll start with research. I purposely chose not to go to a Research One institution. I knew that as a single mom at that time, that was not something that was going to work for me. I re-energized by working with students. So I made a decision early to say, I'm going to go to institutions that value teaching, research, and service, but didn't put the high premium on research. And that was a decision that I made, and I still feel comfortable with that. The institution where I work now values teaching, but they also value research to inform our teaching. So I've got what is a great balance for me. So as a nod to, I hope I'm saying your name right, Keisha, as a nod to Keisha's question, I knew going into this, I was not going to go back to a University of Virginia to try to work in a counselor ed program. So finding that balance is key. Teaching is tough. Teaching is tough because I had people question my ability very politely, and most of my teaching jobs have been in the South. So it's kind of bless your heart. Are you doing okay? Is this really, So that was the culture for me. It wasn't overt. You don't know what you're doing. So being able to read through that was a big deal for me. But teaching energizes me. I love working with students. I also teach part-time at Capella, working with doc students. So and that program is K-Craft. So that informs some of my work too, because online learning has really equalized our other folks' access to quality higher education. So it's not a plug for Capella, but certainly K-Craft accredited programs that are online now have changed how we deliver programs at brick and mortar institutions. So service, I taught at an HBCU. So I don't know if anyone on the call is from an HBCU, but if you are, you don't say no. You don't say no at all. You find ways to say not now. You find ways to say, if I take this on, I'm really going to have to swap something. So let me sit down with my chair and figure out what should be my priority right now. So that was how I handled that. It's easy for me to get sucked into service because I just want to help. We're helpers. That's what we do. What I realized was having a place at the table did not give me a voice. And when you realize that being at the table does not necessarily give you a voice, when I realized that, I stopped wearing myself out trying to be a voice. I just did.
Interesting. Could you say something a little bit more about that? At our last several courageous conversations, the theme of being invisible kept surfacing. So even though you were at the table and tried to have a voice, it sounds like you experienced this phenomenon of being invisible.
I would frame that a little differently.
Okay.
I don't think I was invisible. I think I was quite visible, and my presence was disruptive. Does that make sense? My presence was disruptive because I challenged how we looked at things, because if we want change, we can't continue to do the things that we do. And I'd like to give an example, if that's okay.
Yes.
Higher education, from like a 30,000 level view, is changing rapidly. So our doc programs, for the most part, prepare us to be counselor educators. How does KCREP fit? How do our FTEs fit? How are you going to run that group? But there's a broader picture that Dr. Coker started to talk about. And we're getting a message from Carlos. I'm looking at it. But that 30,000, that 50,000 view should force us to make decisions in a new way. And there are folks at the table who don't see that higher kind of overarching view. And when you begin to look at that, I don't think we're invisible. I think we're disruptive. I think we turn the apple cart over, and it's like, I want you to be invisible, so I want to silence you. But that's my perception of that.
So I have a question for you. One of the index cards we got right here from our last meeting said, along with being courageous, obviously, that's what you were doing, being courageous and having a voice, could bring vulnerability. Is there anything you can say about how you go about being courageous, having these conversations, opening yourself up to potentially negative outcomes?
That's a good question.
That's a really good question. Why didn't you get at the Angie?
Well, anybody can jump in for this. If you can jump in, please. Anybody can jump in.
I think for me, the vulnerability piece has diminished, probably because of position basing. Does that make sense? I hate to say that I'm an administrator and I wear my administrative hat, but people do respond to the position. They may not necessarily respond to me. They're responding to the AVP dean of students. Now, in the grand scheme of things, I'm not on the president's cabinet or anything like that, but people respond to position, particularly in a country like America. We are moved by where we think the power lies, I think. So that idea of vulnerability, as moving from, grad student to assistant professor to tenure professor and now administrator, I have kind of learned to pick and choose my battles, and my sense of vulnerability is different now. Some of the professional experiences I've had have been very disappointing. Some of them have meant that I had to make a decision about employment that I may not have made otherwise. But having gone through those things, I realized that leaving one job and looking at them, and I hope that this metaphor is okay, shaking the dust off my feet and moving on to the next one, that's okay. And I'm still here, and the sun came up. And it goes back to what Dr. Coker said, not being so invested in that identity that if something doesn't work out, I'm one of the ones at the table that says, they're not going to run me off. They're not going to run me off. Blood pressure up, headaches every day. It's time to leave when it gets to that point. It's not a question of, they're not going to run me off. This is not healthy anymore, and I have to make a better decision for me personally. So that level of vulnerability, like, oh, my career, oh, what are they going to do to me? Oh, what's going to happen? That's shifted for me. Now that level of vulnerability for me is, can I be congruent with my work? Is this going to help me be a better wife to my husband, to be a better daughter, to be a better mother and grandmother? That's the vulnerability for me now, because people are going to make decisions about us on the jobs. And sometimes when we do a good job, it still doesn't work out. And that's okay.
Yeah.
Absolutely. Sometimes, and we've heard that some people have actually experienced, toxicity, and some, believe it or not, universities, or sometimes it's just a department. And we've heard this in our last meetings. Some people have experienced a toxic environment. And so you either try to get help, like Dr. Coker said, ask someone, try to get some help, or change the situation. And sometimes people have had to go on to pastures that are greener and more welcoming. So thank you for sharing that.
Yeah.
So could you explain actually how you became interested in your research areas? Did you have a story or some narrative from when you were a teenager, like what Dr. Coker was saying about the strong African-American women that she was surrounded by? Did you have some experience that really shaped your area of research?
I'd have to say my collegiate experience. I went to college in the 80s at a predominantly white university that really was trying to figure out what it was going to do in terms of retaining its Black students. And I can't say that it was always a positive experience. It wasn't. But that experience taught me about who to ask for help. And like we talked about, you have to ask for help from people who know. And the only way you know if they know is to study them. And it's okay to be vulnerable in certain spaces, but I learned quickly who to ask, and after a couple of missteps, who not to ask for help, because everybody doesn't know. They tell you based on their experiences, or they tell you based on their lack of information. And some people mean well, and some people don't. So my research is really focused on the educational experiences of first-generation students. And I've kind of gone through, and as you go on, your research agenda changes. As you learn more, as you discover more, you learn new things. And Dr. Mitchell, I'm not sure how many doctoral students are on the line with us. Are there any doctoral students? Okay, your doctoral research is to get you out of school. This is not your best work. It is not your defining glory. You're trying to graduate. If the paper is still yours by the time you're done, congratulations, but the goal is to graduate and get out. And there are more people who are ABD because they hold that, it's like their baby, let it, song, Disney, let it go, graduate. That's when you can make the difference. So for me, that collegiate experience sparked my interest. What helps students stay in school? What leads students to leave school? How are institutional decisions, systems, and policies, how do they influence what happens with our students? So my view has become much broader and more systemic over the years.
Thank you. What are some other challenges you think that are facing women in higher education at this time?
There's a real crisis of leadership in higher ed right now. As we look around the country, if you're not reading the Chronicle of Education every day, you need to be going on Inside Higher Ed or something like that, because like Dr. Coker said, our field trains us to be content experts. It does not train us to look at the bigger picture. And there are some things that social work and clinical psychology and counseling psychology, particularly social work, they mastered 20 years ago. And we're just talking about it like, ooh, we got it. Social work has been talking about social justice for years, long before we the field start talking about. So when we talk about that cross-discipline or interdisciplinary approach, find out what's going on in some of the fields, anthropology, that are related to what we do. You will find that their work is incredibly informative. So I'm sorry, I lost it. Ask me the question again because I started thinking about.
Oh, no. I guess, yeah. What are some of the challenges facing women in higher education? For example, I want to say one thing. I remember the last Courageous Conversation webinar, Dr. Srisi Wesalatunje talked about women, especially women of color, being serial assistant professors. The Chronicle of Higher Education had an article there about so many professors are adjuncts and they can't find even a full-time job. We know there are professors that have actually had great jobs. And actually, I'm thinking of one professor that I was introduced to by Dr. Voss, who's on the call right now, a friend of hers. There was a professor that left a university, and to make the same pay, she had to teach at 3 or 4 different universities, and she taught about 8 courses just to make the same pay. So there's many challenges. What do you see as some of the challenges facing women in higher ed?
Yeah, I remember now, I'm back. That crisis in leadership is a huge issue. Decisions about who's going to be an assistant professor or adjunct, that's a leadership issue. Those are the decisions that we make sitting around the table. And so, and I have on my other hat now, I'm tying in the bow, so please forgive me. But as an administrator, my job is to think about how many FTEs is this program generating? So when the counseling program comes across the table and K-CREP costs this much money and we've got 8 students and no applicants, and then this is hypothetical, no applicants for the fall, the administrator inside says, oh, and cut. Now the counselor educator in me is like, oh, let's talk, let's plan, let's look. So this is a leadership issue. And when I say leadership, I mean higher ed leadership. There are a confluence of factors that shape who gets a line in the university. And Dr. Coker, you know, Dr. I'm sure other people on the call know. So that leadership in us, those of us who may be at the tenured faculty level, how do we hold our leadership accountable for providing quality educational experiences for our students? If my adjunct faculty is teaching 8 classes someplace else, that person is not going to be able to provide the quality of education that we see. So that crisis of leadership for me is a larger issue. And we're not necessarily training our counselor educators to be leaders. I bumped into an administration because my former president said, hey, come here. I want you to do this. You can do this. Are you talking to me? He said, yeah, I'm talking to you. You can do this. Well, like you said, he saw something in me. I was just glad to be in the space. I'm getting paid in 2 or 3 weeks. The lights are on. It's all good. I mean, and so I hate to say that, but that really was, after being a grad student and having some of the other experiences I had, making it became my priority. Everything's paid for. Student loans are good. I'm good. And sometimes when you're operating from that perspective, it's really harder to see that bigger picture. So I hope that's helpful.
Oh, no, that's excellent. Thank you so much. There's so many challenges. And the good thing is that everyone has made it to the other side. And like you said, the sun is still shining every day. So we want everyone to know there are many wonderful things about being in higher ed, but we do experience these challenges. So can you say, what are some things, like when I think about Oprah has this part about what she knows for sure. What have you learned? And what do you know for sure as you have been successful traveling this journey as a counselor educator?
What do I know for sure? I know for sure that there are going to be isms no matter where I go. Mm-hmm. And once I accepted that, it's okay. And those isms don't have to define my experience. I spent some time being angry about how I was treated. I spent some time being frustrated with colleagues who wrote these beautiful, I'm going to say it, who wrote these beautiful articles and did this great research about social justice and multiculturalism and all that. But when it came down to time in the meeting, they could not operationalize those things that they wrote about. That was very hurtful to me. And I have to say that. It's not to point fingers at anyone in particular, but that was hurtful for me. And once I realized it's really not personal, it feels personal, it looks personal, it may even be intended, whatever the it is, that ism as personal. Most of the time people are competing for resources, and they're going to use whatever they can to get the lion's share of those resources. Some people are just that way. So for other people, it might be because I'm Black and I'm a woman. For other people, it may be because, you know, I'm from the South, or I grew up in DC. So the ubiquitous ism is going to always be there. What I can control is how I respond to it. And once I learned that, people didn't control me with their prejudice or their attitudes or their discrimination. I know that it's been 20 plus years coming. So me being able to say that was not something I could have said even 3 years ago.
Wow, thank you. So you've already touched on what the next question was. How have you addressed challenges? So
this is the Powerful Women of Color webinar that Keith wanted me to come to.
They can't see you, right?
Not yet.
could you, everyone, mute your microphones? Thank you so much.
67, we appreciate you thinking we're powerful. We're so glad you're here.
Thank you.
If I mute, then I can't hear.
You can hear.
Do you have headphones? Oh, no, if you don't mute, maybe Dr. Hipolito-Delgado, if you could tell us what to do. Thank you. So you've already started talking about how to effectively meet the challenges. So what we're talking about today also is, in these courageous conversations, how have you come up with courageous solutions? What is in your toolbox for being successful in higher education? What other ways have been effective in meeting the challenges?
I do have support within the profession. I have women who I trust, who I know I can pick up the phone and call no matter what time it is. Women like Beth Duradoye, you, Dr. Coker, other women, and we built these relationships over the past, 20, 25 years. That helps. But I try to surround myself with people who aren't impressed with the titles. People who will say to me, you know, you really need to like not wear those shoes anymore because they're not cute. I try to surround myself with people who are just regular folk like me. We live in higher ed in this very artificial world that's very caste bound, very position bound. And once a week, because of where I live now, and coming from an HBCU, I'm not in the HBCU, so that was a very affirming experience for me. So once a week, I go and I sit in the barbershop / beauty salon on the other side of town, and I eat chicken wings, and we eat fries, and we talk about love and hip hop, even though I don't watch it, but that's what I do just to regroup and recenter.
Well, excuse me, I have a question. Do you have hot sauce in your bag?
Yes. Yes.
I'm just kidding.
I do.
Okay.
I do. It's a little cute bottle, but yes, I do. So,
Yeah, like Hillary Clinton.
yeah, right. So those are the things I do to recharge, to get me out of higher ed. My husband's not on the call today, but he is a soldier, and he also helps ground me because he will very quietly say, let's go to the park. I can't go to the park. I got to write. Let's go to the park. And so having him and listening to him, he's not insistent, but just that kind of calm, you know what, I think we do need to go to the park. So surrounding myself with people who see if I'm not balanced pretty well, who will say to me, you know what, let's go, and grab me by the hand and do that. So those are things that work for me. Being around people who are not impressed by all this higher ed stuff makes a huge difference for me.
So it sounds like some of getting back to your balance and self-care some of the core values is having the support, family, not just having the identity as a faculty member, as a professor, as a leader, just keeping it real. And that's what people have to remember. Nobody started, you weren't born this way. You didn't start as Dr. Rhonda Bryant. There's so many other identities that you have that are important. I tell people, for example, the most important credential behind my name is MOM, being a mother. And that is what comes first.
Yes. Can I just say something? Yeah, also,
yes.
In terms of helping to meet some of the challenges, I think professional organizational involvement is also another way in which can assist us in meeting some of the challenges that we experience. Oftentimes we as women, we tend to write a lot about multicultural issues, and that kind of work, if you don't have other people on your faculty who are doing that kind of work, it can become very intellectually isolating. So one of the things I have found is, professional involvement in, let's like AMCD, CSJ. I know Dr. Bryant was president of, past president of CSJ. I think sometimes when you can surround yourself with other professionals who care about some of those issues, it can help diminish some of the isolation that is often experienced when you're writing about these things. The other piece to it is, oftentimes they offer research grants, opportunities for continued education. So I think in involvement in those organizations, the ones that are particular to your research interests, are helpful as well in terms of meeting some of the challenges.
That's an excellent point. I tell my students all the time and faculty that, just as you're saying, all of the professional organizations, they have contests, they have grants. There's a lot of support there. I remember one time I had a student that wrote about the most important skill of a counselor, and she wrote about empathy, and I think she won like $500 or something. So there's all types of support out there if we just reach out. And I think that the more that we understand that we're in this together and we focus on unification and not being divisive. Oftentimes people operate in their silos, and some tend to compete, but we're not competing with each other. We must be a united front and come together to share, and not be distrustful, because sometimes we don't trust, and sometimes for good reason. And so coming together and being authentic and remembering what it is to be a counselor, remembering about the what we learned from Carl Rogers and being Rogerian and forgetting. I also often think about, sometimes there are teachers in K through 12, and believe it or not, sometimes they don't like children. And sometimes there are people in the profession that have been around so long that we forget to go back to the basic core, back to our mission and our vision and to our core values. Can you talk a little bit about, is there anything else you would like to add before we move to the next segment, Dr. Bryant, about balance and self-care and maintaining your equanimity? Is there anything else that you do to maintain balance?
One thing I wanted to go back to the point that Dr. Coker made. I did not understand that people work together to get that research done. I thought it was something magical that somebody did by working in their office, holding themselves in, writing, and getting it done. And once I realized that there was collaboration that resulted in that kind of work, it took a huge load off me, because I felt like a slacker, like I can't get this done. I started to write, the phone rang, I got to do laundry, so I started at the door. And so going back to that piece that she just said, recognizing that there are other people in ACA, because that is my professional home. I am involved with NASPA, but I consider ACA, it's like going to, you talked about like revival. It's like going to revival and family reunion. And I'm the one who can't do the lecture slide, but nobody puts you out because you can't do it, right? It's been so good for me to be involved with ACA and making connections that way. And I would even say with the leadership, David Kaplan, Richard, these are people that if you call them, they will call you back. They will respond to emails. Cerisi will, past presidents. Most of the folks that I've come in contact have been very open and willing. So that is a good way to find balance. So I'm really glad that you brought that point out. And it's very helpful for me in finding balance.
Okay, I would like our national audience to know that we have a wonderful comment from Berlin. Berlin said, I was 49 when I decided to pursue a doctorate. I am now 52, and I thank God because what I have experienced in academia in this journey was necessary. You guys have given me the motivation to not get sidetracked because of things going on. Thanks. So that was a comment that we just received. Thank you so much. So what if, can you talk about the importance, you've already touched on it and mentioned a few names. Can you talk about the importance of mentors and maybe some people who've been a mentor to you in addition to who you've already mentioned?
Mentors. So I'll talk about my professional mentors and then I'll talk about my personal mentors. So certainly having the opportunity to work with Dr. Van Hoos, even though I didn't know who Dr. Van Hoos was very special to me. Let's see, mentors, professional mentors. I have to say that, wow, that's a really tough question. And the reason why it's so tough is because I'm thinking about all the people who stopped just to say, how are you doing? How are your kids, like at ACA conferences? When I think about mentoring and professional mentoring, I think about that. Dr. Joan Franks was my dissertation advisor. She was the only African-American female tenured full professor at University of Virginia in the Department of Counselor Education. Cortland Lee was our chair. Spencer Niles, who does the career work, was there. So I had a lot of kind of high-profile people in the field. She was the person who mentored all of us with our supervision. So we took comps. We didn't worry about that area because she had drilled us so hard in her area, which was supervision. We knew we were ready. So professional mentors have run the gamut. But the personal mentors, I think about my father who worked swing shifts so we could go to Catholic school. I think about my daughter who just finished Johns Hopkins with Cheryl and Norma Devon. She just finished their master's program in school counseling. And talking with her, even when she was a kid, she had no frame of reference. She said, well, if they're not nice, why do you have to play with them? And just those kinds of things that just grounded me. There were so many people who have invested in me over the years with no idea that they were going to get any return on their investment. Really had no idea. Maybe they thought they did. But those are the things that changed my life. Somebody being able to say, you can do this, like Angie, you can come back to higher ed, you can do this. You have no idea. I shouldn't say it's so powerful. It's so powerful. So I don't know if I answered your question, but.
No, that's excellent. I just think what we're hearing today is just the importance of having mentors. I know that we've had them all along the way from our doctoral programs and our professional life and our personal life. And those things and those people have really kept us, like what Dr. Coker said, anchored, and people who believe in us to let us know, that there are these challenges. You're not imagining things. And so it's important to know that your mentors are not only the people at your university, at your school, that outside of the university, within your family and other disciplines, it could be a person that doesn't have a doctoral degree. As Dr. Coker said, there are people who look out for you, that you have that sense of someone being there for you and being in your corner. And so you definitely need mentors and need to be trusting. And I know that some schools have tried to assign a mentor and do for the purpose of research, to assign a mentor. But I think that ideally, that's one way to look at it and one approach. But I think that the mentor-mentee relationships that are cultivated in an organic way tend to be the most powerful because it happens naturally. And I don't know if you have any other advice about, how to find a mentor.
Sure. I am always struck by, so I have another daughter who is a special ed teacher. And sometimes when we go out to dinner, I take my business cards. They're like, okay, Mom, we're going to go do what we do because we know you're going to give your speech to the person who serves. But I always take my business card and I talk with the person who, if I feel so inclined or led to do it, I talk with them about higher ed and college and things like that. And I give them my business card and I put my cell phone number on the back. And I'm always amazed at the people who don't call. Now, it could be that they don't call because they think I'm creepy and they don't want to talk with me. But I've talked with people and I bumped into them again and said, well, I didn't think you was serious, or, I didn't know I could really call. And so this is for the people on the call. If you leave here today and not get in touch with the three of us after this, that's your fault. Now, I'm just saying that's your fault, because I say that with love, because we're here and we're taking time to do this. And I think I can speak for my colleagues with this. We care deeply or else we wouldn't be doing this. So everybody on this call has access to 1, 2, 3 women who will mentor you, even if it's one time a year. Doesn't have to be every week, one time a year. So, Michelle, it's about recognizing those opportunities and taking advantage of them. And that is what happens to me with mentoring. People have the opportunity, but they don't seize them sometimes. I've done this. And when the window closes, it's gone. So taking advantage of those opportunities and saying, you know what, Dr. Mitcham, I talked with you on that call, and I just wanted to follow up with you and thank you. And can I call you from time to time? Can I email you? There's your mentor right there.
Mm-hmm. Yes. And I have to say, again, it's just so powerful because these are conversations we've had. When we're at ACA, we know that typically we're going to go to a dinner. We're going to go somewhere and talk for 3 or 4 hours and have these courageous conversations behind closed doors. So I appreciate us taking this out in the open nationally in this forum and taking it to the stage because, when you put something on the open, you demystify it and take away its power. So I thank all the women, that have mentored me. Thank, to you, Dr. Bryant, Dr. Coker, Dr. Kim Voss is here from Xavier. I love her. Thank you, dear. She's here. There's so many women and they have mentored me along the way. And you are not alone. What you're experiencing is not your imagination. So that's why we have to reach out and maintain these relationships and don't think that you're a bother. We've all started, the same way. We've had challenges. And so we have to come together and talk about it so we can get to the solutions. I would like to. Yes, ma'am.
I have to say, my mom rocks. So if I really get stuck, I call her every morning going to work. Yes. And everybody in the office knows that I do that. And somebody came to me and said, you call your mom every day. Every day I call my mom before I come into work so she can pray with me before I get started. So I needed to say that because I couldn't have it recorded all over the world that I never gave a shout out to my mom. So thanks, Mom.
Oh, thank you so much. And see, isn't that amazing? There are people that keep us grounded. It doesn't matter the degrees. And I share that I actually talk to my brother, Michael Mitcham, every day. We talk on the phone in the morning, and it's probably because since the age of 19 to 21, we were like orphans. We talk every single day, and our children think it's amazing. They're like, why do you talk to Uncle Michael every day? We talk every single day. And I think everybody has that person, right? There's somebody that you don't think of, but they're a mentor and they're support, and they're really just there for you. And so it's important to remember those people because we did not get here by ourselves, right? So what other advice, because we're getting down to what advice would you give other women in counselor education or women who are counselor educators that choose to be in higher ed and maybe they go down a different route and become an expert or become a leader or an administrator in student affairs, like you all have had different experiences. And then we'll open it up for questions. So the audience would like to start typing questions in. we will integrate those questions in the end of the hour in just a few minutes after Dr. Bryant speaks about general advice to women.
So first piece of advice that's going to sound harsh, but I want you to think about it. As you face isms and challenges, recognize that they're going to be there no matter where you are, no matter what the school is, excuse me, no matter if it's a PWI, no matter if it's HBCU, Native American, tribal college, excuse me, minority serving. Those challenges will be there. It's what you make of those challenges and not internalizing them is really, really important. We have a tendency to do that, I think, sometimes, because we have this idea, excuse me, particularly as counselors, that the world is supposed to be fair. And we know that the world is not fair, but that doesn't mean we give up on it. If it means that you have to go to counseling 3 times over to deal with some hurt or some trauma that you haven't really dealt with, do that. If that means that you have to develop some new skills in managing and coping with racism or whatever ism it is, do that. We spend a lot of time lamenting that we have the isms, and so my perspective is probably not a popular one. I think we're going to always have those. We can do the best we can to ameliorate them and make them better, but learning how to cope, learning how to challenge in a way that preserves us and our sanity, because if we're not in the room, we're not going to be able to do this. And I'm going to say this, and it's a really hard thing to say, don't become bitter by those bad experiences. It's easy to become bitter. It's easy to look at people who don't have the talent that you have, who've gotten further, may make more money, may all those things, but recognizing that, okay, you know what? I'm channeling a little bit of Albert Ellis here. You know, the world is not fair. How do I deal with that in a way that helps me cope, but also maintain hope that things will get better? But recognizing that it won't always be fair. But you don't have to be bitter. You don't have to internalize other people's inadequacies.
Yeah.
Oh, that's an excellent point. We do have a question I want to share. Thank you so much. We have a question from Tia. Hi, Tia. We're so happy you're here. Tia is a 4th-year doctoral student in counselor education at a PWI. She's truly appreciated all of the courageous conversations over the years, as Dr. Coker said. Being amidst all of you again is truly sustaining and healing for me. She said, thank you sincerely. Thank you. We love that you're here. Her question focuses on tokenism. How do you navigate the difference between opportunities that you're given simply because you're a rising counselor educator versus being led to opportunities where you are just serving as a token? That's question number 1. Would you ladies want to speak to that?
Well, I think the thing that comes to mind is, well, obviously the problematic one is being led to opportunities where you're just serving as a token. Oprah talks a lot about intention. What's your intention in terms of doing something? And, you know, I think for me, I always think about, okay, so if I'm asked to do a task, my intention, I have to, you know, why do I want to do it? And obviously you pick up a task, or you serve on a board, or you serve on a committee, you know, because you want to lend your perspective. You perhaps sometimes want to increase your own skill level in that new capacity. You know, I think about as Dr. Bryant talked about, your sort of relationships. What's the other person's intent? And I think that if the positive outweighs the negative, then I'm most likely going to say yes to that opportunity. And I have served in some capacities knowing that I was a token, but at the end I had totally disrupted and deconstructed their own perceptions of about what I could do. And so that was an opportunity for me to be a change agent as well. So
I remember somebody asked me to serve on the campus appearance improvement committee. And all I could think was, really? You want me to be on the petunia picking committee? So what I decided at that point was that was one that I just was like, you know what? I can't.
Yeah.
But, and I said that, and I said to my chair, really, like, this is one that is so obvious that I can't do this. But what I have learned to do is try to get the most out of every experience. And so even though I didn't do the petunia picking one, I used that opportunity to learn more about campus physical plan, how we make decisions about who uses space on campus. How do I break into those areas about campus architecture that I never would have been at the table for? So now as an administrator, when people start talking about you doing a space utilization study, I'm like, I know what that is. So recognizing that even though somebody may give an opportunity because they want to have diversity or things like that, but we're not trained to do this, but what can I get out of this? Is there a way that I can use this to expand my own skill set beyond what I already have? And that's where we have to move away from that emotional part that says, they're trying to use me, they're trying to present this as, and you didn't ask your question this way, I'm just kind of walking through my own responses to some of these things. How can I use this to move ahead in a way that maybe they didn't intend for me to move ahead? And that's where we have the opportunity as opposed to just focusing on the challenge.
Okay. Excellent, thank you. And we actually have another question. Question number 2 is, as a doctoral student, how do you self-advocate, set boundaries, cope with the realization that opportunities you're provided with might not just be about your potential, but also or mainly just because you're a woman of color? And I think you already, touched on that. Yeah. Is there anything else you wanted to add to that?
I will add, because I think implicit in the question is this power differential. As an assistant professor, there's some power I have that I don't have as a doctoral student. I will share that in my doctoral program, I was not mentored to write articles. I wasn't mentored to K-Crep business. I didn't get any of that. My thing was, I was a single mom. I had 2 kids. I got to get done. I don't know what I'm going to do after I get done, but I know I got to get a job. And it's not cool to say that I didn't have that level of sophistication, but I didn't. I was just trying to get through. So the other pieces came later. So what I would say to you is, think about what you want from your doctoral experience. So a lot of times, people don't realize they're doing to you what they're doing. And right. I'm not going to give people a pass, but we are so sensitized to these issues that sometimes we try to educate people about, what they're doing and naming it and all that. You don't have time for that as a doc student. Your job is to get the degree, get those seminal or those key experiences that shape. So getting through that classwork, getting through that dissertation, and owning that should be a priority. And sometimes I know I got bogged down with, so-and-so got that opportunity, why didn't I get it? So-and-so got to do that, I didn't get to do that. But even recognizing with that there are opportunities that you have, like Dr. Mitchell talked about, getting on that ACA website, looking at opportunities, seeing the grants that the different divisions have. If you do those things, your faculty are going to come to you. Once you win that ACA Ethics Award, once you participate, they'll start coming to you saying, oh, tell me about so-and-so. So I don't know if this is helpful advice, but focus on your dissertation and your schoolwork and what you're supposed to do. And if your institution is not giving you opportunities, find opportunities and meaning outside of that institution and focus on that, because if you focus on the other, you will get sidetracked, and the emotional energy that it takes to navigate that can keep you from getting your degree.
So at this time, what I want to do, we have to wrap up because our time is ending in just about 3 minutes. So I want to thank our guests. I want to thank Dr. Rhonda Bryant. Thank you so much for sharing your wisdom, your expertise in worldliness, and also to Dr. Angela Coker for sharing your expertise and wisdom and having these courageous conversations. I created the courageous conversations based on our conversations over the years. We've been presenting this for years, and I know that, some people tried to emulate the courageous conversations, but thank you everyone for giving us credit for doing this. And I'm glad if it has paved the way or illuminated the path of others who are now talking about it. But courageous conversation started right here, started with these women, and started with us, and I want to continue. We have to open up spaces. We can't make the pathological accommodations, as Dr. Voss talks about, for anybody. We have to call things out, have those courageous conversations, and be comfortable and trusting in our space. And we have to come together and really focus on, again, the unification, being a united front, not being divisive. And I want all the sisters on the call to know, of any color, that we are here for you. You're not alone. We will share information. So you can call us, you can email us, and we are here for you because people have been there for us. So I want to thank everybody, and I want to give the guest an opportunity to thank you as well. First, could we have Dr. Coker?
I just want to thank everybody. I was listening to you and reading some of the comments on the side. I just want to say, that this too, there's something very powerful about even using this forum to talk about the challenges. I mean, this is yet another opportunity that we can use to validate ourselves, to empower ourselves, and also to mentor others. So this is another way in which we operationalize a lot of the stuff that we've talked about. And I want to thank you, Dr. Mitcham, for making this happen, and your vision for the work. And I also want to, thank Dr. Rhonda Bryant. She's my sister girl, and I'm always thrilled when I have opportunities to interact with you all. And we've got our participants. I'm just want to thank them for taking time out of their busy schedule, because we know we don't have free time, to be a part of this. So thank you.
I just want to say to everyone on the call, just be encouraged. This is a wonderful time to be a counselor, to be a counselor educator. Unfortunately, people are not putting us out of work. There's a lot of hurt. There's a lot of pain. There's a lot of need for what we do in the world. And so you are contributors to solving some of the world's toughest problems. And remember that we are not the first ones to do this work. Fannie Lou Hamer started this work. Sojourner Truth started this work. So we've got a long glory of people who have started the work. They may not have been called counselors, but they started this work. So be encouraged. There is a bright side to this, and keep focused on your goals. Don't get distracted by the isms. They will be there, but you can work through and succeed.
Yes,
absolutely. Keep your head high. Remain steadfast. Keep your eye on the prize, and just continue to communicate and reach out to us, because we are here for you. Thank you, everyone. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.